Welcome to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. I'm Hallie Tecco.
I'm Michael Esquivel.
And I'm Steve Krause. And every Monday, we bring you the latest in healthcare innovation as we sit down with entrepreneurs and industry experts.
So buckle up and join us as we figure out how to improve healthcare for all. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. Today, we are diving deep into the topic of accountability in healthcare. Not accountability of healthcare companies, which would be a completely different episode. Today, we're going to talk about accountability of companies that make the products we use every day that impact our health and well-being. The reality is that our health is more shaped by the world around us than just our interactions with the healthcare system. What we eat, where we live, how we move, and even how we connect with others, these everyday factors play an enormous role in our well-being. In public health, we call these the social determinants of health. So should we demand that the companies behind the products and services that make us less healthy take responsibility for their impact? Today, Michael and I will be talking to Thomas Goetz, the co-founder of Building H, a nonprofit research and editorial project that explores how companies can better own their outcome for the impact on consumer health. Thomas previously co-founded Iodine, a Yelp for medicine that helped people understand which medications work best for them. Iodine was acquired by GoodRx, where he was most recently the chief of research. Previously, Thomas was executive editor at Wired and wrote 2 best-selling books in our space. Thomas, it is so good to have you here.
It is my honor. I love this podcast, so I'm glad to be here.
Thomas, welcome, my good friend. It's been a while. It's great to see you. Great to hear your terrific voice. So let me kick it off this morning or today here. So you've had a truly fascinating career path, from journalism to founding digital health companies to leading research at a publicly traded one. So how have these experiences brought you to where you are today and your current focus on accountability?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I guess the short version, I'll try to make this a short version. What I was really invested with as a journalist was trying to help people make sense of complicated things, help them understand things that matter to them in their lives, but may not actually be cognizant of or may not kind of have the wherewithal to grok. And so that was a fantastic journalistic project, and Wired was really good at that. But then I was really interested, Hallie, I dipped my toe into public health and came out with an idea for a book, but really was thinking about, okay, how can data and better information drive better decision-making for individuals? And I was really, and this is a kind of the paradigm of digital health writ large. And this was 2010 when my first book, The Decision Tree, came out. And that quickly led to starting Iodine, which was trying to turn that kind of experience of taking medications into better decision-making for yourself and others. All that was precedent to realizing ultimately to having kind of this epiphany, what I call epiphany, other people kind of would say is the stating the obvious. But all that decision-making, all that idea of kind of empowering the individual doesn't really work at scale, I don't believe. I think it's really challenging to think about all these things, all these structures of society that have an impact on our health, and then saying to individuals, oh, you should behave better, you should do better, you should eat better, whatever, when all the context of our everyday life is pushing us in the wrong direction. And at first I sat with that and it was really quite cynical, right? That's almost a depressing realization that all these tools that all three of us have spent more than a decade dealing with in terms of digital health may not be moving the needle in terms of population health. But what we realized in time was that maybe we can take that idea of these kind of systems that are not optimized for individual health or not optimized for human health and try to change the context of people's lives. This in some ways is taking a page from one of my heroes, Buckminster Fuller, about changing the environment is much more effective than asking people to change their actions. So that was kind of the shift in course. I still believe that we should be trying to improve people's health, but I think the idea of expecting individuals to do it on their own is probably not the most effective course of action, at least for me in my career.
Yeah, the U.S. is uniquely bad at keeping people healthy. And it's not just because Americans are somehow less responsible than everyone else. I mean, we've built a society that makes being healthy really challenging. We've designed our cities for cars, not people. Yep. Fast food joints outnumber grocery stores. And, it makes being healthy, I always say this, like being unhealthy is the easier choice and the cheaper choice. And sometimes for a lot of Americans, the only choice.
Yeah.
And so we can't say that's not individual failure. That's like a systemic breakdown of what a healthy society should look like. And we pay the price for this.
Yeah. And you mentioned fast food, and that's a great example because it's not only the thing about, like, just thinking about the fast food industry for a second, it's not just the food itself, but if you look at the state of the art in the fast food industry, it's all about drive-thrus, right? It's about 2-lane, now 4-lane drive-thrus. So they're trying to move people, keep them in their car, don't even walk into the restaurant. That's inefficient. And
they don't even have the playgrounds anymore, the indoor playgrounds for kids anymore.
Oh, yeah, great.
Honestly, Hallie, sometimes they don't even have seats inside the restaurant. So all of these things, all these are really very exquisitely designed environments to maximize the kind of corporate benefit. Their incentives are profit and consumption, but they all work at odds with human health, right? So where we should be getting out, we should be, McDonald's, the pitch used to be like, it's a happy place to go. It's a social experience. And that is just not the case anymore. It's now a place you drive through. So anyway, it's an example of the industry, the sophistication of these services and products is so mind-boggling. Yeah. And ultimately they don't help human health.
Yeah. I mean, just on that note, for any of the millennials out there that remember this. So when I was a kid, I did this thing called Book It. And you would like read a bunch of books a month, and then Pizza Hut would give you a free personal pan pizza. Well, Book It still exists. And so I had my son, who's a second grader, do it because I wanted him to just read a bunch of books. And so he did it, and he got the free pizza, and we went to Pizza Hut. Now, Pizza Hut, do you guys remember Pizza Hut when we were younger?
Of course.
You go in, you have this salad bar, you sit at these booths, you see like your friends from school. It was like such, as you said, like this social moment, and you got to go because you earned that free pizza. And even now, Pizza Hut, I learned there are no more like physical Pizza Huts where you can go in and sit and have the salad bar. It's all takeout. It's completely different. As you said, it's all about, right now, it's like corporate profits. It's easier for them to just do takeout pizza and you can eat it at home versus have these gathering places.
Yeah, it feels, Thomas, clearly it's about efficiency, about maximizing corporate profits. Do you think awareness changes some of this for these big corporates? Like, hey, are you guys thinking about these downstream effects, or are they just so in your research just so singularly focused on the profit motivations that even when being made aware of this, maybe they're not thinking about it.
Or being shamed. Can we shame them into better decisions or no?
Yeah, well, that's a great question because we've wrestled with this at Building H, and we don't. So the traditional approach of public health is to shame or to scold, right? To do research that shows that fast food is bad, which is not necessarily revealing. We all kind of know that. So, and it's not very effective, right? Shaming or scolding is not effective in the context where their corporate incentives are to maximize growth, which is more people eating or more people driving cars or whatever those priorities may be. So what we're really working to do is to create a new system of metrics where companies will first, as you say, Michael, be cognizant, just to be aware.
Yeah, awareness.
Yeah, just to know that, human health and negative human health is an output of our process, which is, economists call it externalities. So those externalities on human health are very real, tangible, and measurable. And so that's part of what we're trying to do is to just, and that involves econometric analysis and all these kind of, it's hard work, but it's also thinking about how can we talk to these companies in ways that they will understand and work back into their own systems. And both of you know the language of KPIs and OKRs, the ways companies manage their priorities and goals is very sophisticated. and targeted on specific outcomes or targets, right? So if we can get companies to think about human health as one of their targets, if we can speak to them in the language of OKRs and KPIs, then maybe we can actually start to get them to prioritize these kinds of outputs, or at least to measure them. I think that's the first thing we're trying to do, is just to get them to measure them in the context of an inevitable output of maximizing consumption.
Someone's paying for these externalities.
Yeah, and right now we're paying for it through the healthcare system, right?
All of us are paying for it.
And so that's part of the reason there's $4.5 trillion in healthcare costs is because, I mean, obesity, again, if we're just talking about food, it's the most obvious one, but obesity leads to diabetes, which leads to hospitalization, and there's massive costs there, billions of dollars of costs. And that all starts with everyday behaviors and everyday choices. In part, and I don't want to get crazy here, part of my argument...
Get crazy. This is the heart of healthcare. Get crazy.
Part of me actually feels like in many of these situations, we don't actually have free will. We have this, kind of idea that, individuals should just choose better. But I don't think it's not a fair fight. We don't actually have a real choice, or most people who are not in a position of privilege or high resources may not have a choice. As Hallie, you said at the beginning, it's like, it might be easier, faster, and more effective just to go to fast food to feed your family. And that is, in some sense, not a choice that people have in the sense of being as easily or as readily able to make a choice to have healthy food. And so thinking about that as an unfair fight, I think is an important part of it.
That's interesting. So you think it's actually harder to get consumers, healthcare consumers, or just consumers to change demand versus getting companies to change the supply. And that's the strategy you're going after.
Yeah, that's part of it, definitely. Yeah. Because I think it's like if you're asking individuals to undo what all of the structure of society is pushing them towards, you're just not going to, again, thinking about populations, you're not going to get enough people to make the better choice. You might get the acolytes of Peter Attia or Huberman, these people who have these resources and the ability to optimize their lives. But that's not most of us, and that's not the majority of people out there.
Yeah, Thomas, I mean, I say this from time to time. I mean, it's expensive to be truly healthy in this country.
Exactly.
And so what I particularly find compelling here is that it really is trying to align incentives. I think there has to be a structure where profits and healthy outcomes can be aligned. And what I love about what Building H is doing with its index is we're not just going to shame you. We're going to help you find a way to align those KPIs, those OKRs, as you said, in a way that shows, yes, we can make a ton of money here and have good downstream health outcomes. And to me, that's really inspirational because to your point, I mean, structurally, I think on the demand side, it's going to be really, really hard to achieve what we're all hoping to do, which is to lead healthier, happier lives. And so I really commend that. Would you tell us a little bit about the report? I think the most recent that you all issued here at the end of last year, right?
In October.
In October, yeah.
Yeah. So this is this index takes several years to put together because it's this kind of massive crowdsourced. I'll spare the methodology, but it's something we worked out with our advisor, Sarah Singer, at the Stanford School of Medicine. And it's a really well thought out methodology. So we reviewed or rated about 75 products, consumer products, in 4 industries. So we look at food, transportation, housing, and entertainment. And entertainment is fairly broad. It's everything from streaming companies to video games to bicycles. But what we do is we rate them on 5 health behaviors. So behaviors that have been recognized as having positive or potentially positive impacts on human health. So it's socializing, getting outside, exercising, eating well, and sleeping. So those are 5 behaviors that are highly correlated with positive health. Or not enough of them, or the wrong ones, negative health. And what you see is that different products have impacts on many of these behaviors at once. So I talked about fast food, how it's not just the food itself, but it's about these socialization things and other components. With something like the company that scores worst in our index in the last one was Netflix. And that's partly because it's so well designed to do a few things. To make you stay up later, to the autoplay, right, is incredibly bad for health. It increases lassitude, so you're kind of not moving, you're staying inside, you're not socializing. And so it's this compounding of several behaviors at once. Now, Michael, what you said about trying to put out, not just scolding companies, but give them areas for improvement, even something like Netflix, we try to point to specific changes in the products that would make them, a little less bad. So moving, and in fact, we've seen some shifts over the about 4 years that we've been doing this index. We've seen some shifts in the product design. So a few years ago, Netflix had autoplay on children's shows, which we thought was particularly worrisome because if you're training kids to just binge at a very early age, this is exactly when they should be starting healthy habits of exercise and socialization, et cetera. So between our 2022 report and our 2024 report, they actually changed that. They changed the autoplay. They removed it from children's programming. I can't say it's because of Building H, but it was an improvement that they made to the product that makes it a little better. And there are several similar things that can be done in the various products. You could have, what we talk a lot about is what are the defaults on the product. So having the ability, for instance, for you to kind of say, okay, I want to maximize my consumption tonight at 90 minutes. And so you put that in as a preference. And so Netflix could have a pop-up that says, you've reached your limit for the night. Do you want to keep going? That would be an improvement. That would be an easy thing for them to build into the product. Apple has this in their phones and stuff like that. So anyway, these are the kind of things we try to point to.
Yeah. You named companies straight up if they had good scores or bad scores. I'm just curious, did any of them respond to the report directly?
Yes. When I was at the Wall Street Journal, we had this rule called the no surprises rule. So you never print anything about a company before you've called them and let them know that they're going to be in the newspaper. And that is not as followed as religiously as it should be in journalism these days. But I still subscribe to it. And so we had the no surprises rule with Building H, where we would let companies know that we're reviewing their products. And then at the outset, and then when we had our ratings ready, we would send it to them. Often their PR team or their communications team. Sometimes we get no response. Sometimes we would get some response and engagement. So we'd have people get back to us and say, well, actually, have you considered this or this? Like Instacart, for instance, got back to us about some of the things that they had changed in some of the ways they package or offer different services. So anyway, those were sometimes very positive engagements that we got from companies. And we're all ears. We really want to make sure we're reflecting the accurate status quo out there.
So, Thomas, you told us who was the worst performing in the 24 index. Who was the best?
The number one company was Cul-de-sac, which is a really very smart developer. They're developing some communities in Arizona, and they're optimizing pedestrian flow. They're optimizing social areas, minimizing cars. In some sense, it's a ringer. It's obviously a company that is prioritizing a certain kind of healthy community. And so that's what they're trying to build to. But we wanted to put it in there. We wanted to make sure we recognize them, but also to kind of put it in there as an example of how companies can prioritize healthy values and still kind of profit, make it a viable business.
Yeah, they have to bake it into their DNA from day one. I just think it's going to be really hard. I mean, going back to the Netflix example and getting folks to become addicted and continuing to watch shows. I mean, social media they make money the more we're addicted to their apps. And so like realigning that is going to be really challenging because what's healthy for us is less time on the apps, which is less money for them. So it's going to be hard to unwind some of these companies from the impact. Curious your take on that.
Totally. A couple things. One is, I think, some of the recommendations that the Surgeon General has put out regarding social media is an important kind of stake in the ground in terms of acknowledging that, the models of like cigarettes or pollution or toxic emissions, those were examples of the consumer world and oftentimes the regulatory world, a combination of factors that have tried to acknowledge and measure externalities and hold companies accountable. So that's happening in part here and there with social media. The other direction, though, that we go towards, or that we're moving towards, is trying to move health into the ESG framework, right? So this is the
Yep.
Hallie, you know this, but it's the way some investors evaluate their companies that they would invest in is according to how well they perform on environmental, social, and governance standards. And those standards are determined by third-party organizations, but investors then look to those organizations and how well companies rate, and some investors will use those as standards for how to allocate their funds. It's become very controversial, somewhat politicized, actually highly politicized.
Very.
But what we've realized is that health, you'd think it would be a core part of the social component of ESG, but it's almost invisible right now. So what we're trying to do and what we're working towards is trying to come up with a very metric-based measurement of health impacts that ESG evaluators, ESG rating companies can build into their ESG framework, that then, if some investors want to use that as a way to decide or determine whether or not they are investing in healthy companies, not just environmentally and sustainable companies, but also healthy companies, then they will have a metric to use and something to benchmark against. But that's right now that doesn't exist. And so we believe that that's the kind of next phase of our work.
Yeah, Thomas, this is what I love about this. I mean, it's really awareness, right? Let's start there and educate ourselves about that impact. But coming back to the social media companies, I hear Hallie loud and clear and 100% agree. But what I'm hearing, what Building H's impact could be is, all right, maybe we do things on the margins that may seem incremental, but actually have long and meaningful downstream impacts. And so maybe we're not going to change the way Instagram and TikTok and others get us to doom scroll all day long, but maybe there's ways that we can break that to incorporate some healthy behavior. And what may seem like just truly incremental or even minimal changes actually have huge impacts on a societal global basis. And so what I am encouraged about what you're doing is, look, we're not going to tell social media companies to stop their fundamental business, but what we are going to do is maybe we don't do autoplay. Maybe we say, these particular shows require people coming together. I don't know. I'm not a social media expert, but it would, to me, seems like, hey, sometimes these problems can be so overwhelming that we think we need these grandiose, massive new solutions, when in fact, sometimes changes on the margins can have really, really significant downstream effects.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the thing I would add to that is not only will small changes in a product yield some improvement, but if you look at cigarettes and the way, so we knew that cigarettes were bad. The Surgeon General report came out in early 1960s, right? And it took, and the research was actually, the actual research was in the 1950s. So it took 40 years before the attorney generals got together and sued tobacco companies. So that's decades, right? 30, 40 years. And it took not just the legal apparatus, but it took changes in regulation. It took a lot of different kinds of research in terms of public health. It took some social changes in social stigma. It was this multifactorial attack or war against tobacco that was not just one thing. And so I think what you're getting at, or part of what you're getting at, is if we can get companies to change and get the way people evaluate companies to change and to reflect health, those are significant changes of a much larger strategy that we need to have kind of unfold to improve health. I can't say we're going to fix it, but I can say that what we're trying to do is to draw attention at a new point of engagement for public health or for health, which is to go to the companies that are causing bad health, right? It seems obvious.
Well, then you look at some cool ones on your list, Thomas, by the way. A couple that stood out to me, Sweet Green. I think Hallie shouted them out earlier.
Love Sweet Green.
Yep. We have one down in our office here in Mountain View. I'm there frequently. It's always a good meal option. But another one, Niantic, Pokemon Go. Yep. I can't tell you how many kids I see, even my teenage son, who's in his late teens now, going out and engaging with this game, but doing it outside. And so there are examples of even where technology is driving maybe more sedentary or less health-oriented directions where we do see success. And I mean, I can't tell how many times it'll be 11:30 at night and my son was unfortunately still up and he's saying, Dad, I need to go out and get this Pokemon Go character or whatever. And I'm like, well, and it's 11:30 at night. And I just got to walk down the street, Dad. And I'm like, are you crazy?
Well, if he doesn't yet know, Michael, Pokemon last year released something called Pokemon Sleep that was like apparently incredibly successful, and it like links your smartwatch to like gamifies sleeping, which is exactly what these Pokemon obsessed young kids need.
Yeah. And there's also Ev Williams' new social app, Mozi or Mozi, M-O-Z-I. Have you guys seen this? So what it's trying to do is it's using a kind of structure of a social app to get people to connect in real life. So you register and you say where you're going to be or where you are, and you kind of announce to your friend network. So you decide how large you want that network to be, but you announce that you are in X place and want to do X, Y, or Z, and it kind of solicits engagement. Now, I'm not saying that's going to work. It's brand new. It came out right after Thanksgiving. But it's an example of trying to use the mechanisms of social media, or like Niantic, using the mechanisms of video games to actually foster good behaviors instead of negative behaviors.
Godspeed.
Yes.
Like we need more of that. So we talked about changing behavior. Consumer behavior is hard. We talked about incentivizing companies through awareness. But there is this third lever of government, things that we've seen like taxes on sugary drinks, that, just zoning, that have a huge impact on health and behaviors. But where kind of your head is at for that third lever of the government involvement in this?
Yeah, great question. So it definitely matters. And policy and regulation is a core lever for public health and changing some of these structures. Again, cigarettes and taxes is a great example.
Yeah.
So we want that to happen. It's not where we're focused at Building H, because I think because this problem is obviously so big, one of the things that kind of took us a while to realize was that just focusing on this corporate lens, or through this corporate lens, is a new approach that in and of itself is going to be a lot of work. And so we kind of wait for we'll allow the kind of traditional apparatus of public health to work through regulators and regulations such as taxes that might address the same problem. But I do think I'm glad you mentioned the political context, because frankly, and this is another bigger conversation, but the reality is that the very idea of public health is in some sense under attack or under duress right now. And I'm worried about that, like a lot of people, but I also feel like in some sense, public health has failed to make its case, and public health has failed to prove out the value that it has very hugely given to society over the decades or of the centuries. And right now, public health is in some sense stuck in a very traditional way of highly rational, highly logical, let us do what highly expert-based paradigm that is highly suspicious to other people. And so I feel like one of the things I'm excited about with Building H is just coming up with a different approach that maybe will start to change or start to push towards some of our larger public health goals, but through a different area of attack.
Thomas, one question that's top of mind for a lot of companies, especially startups here in Silicon Valley, and that's an ecosystem, not a geographic reference. There's been a rise in PBCs, public benefit corporations, which are for-profit businesses that aim to create public benefits while operating responsibly and sustainably. We've seen companies in our space like Aledade, Viva, Warby Parker, and many others are PBCs. Do you think they can build this into that designation, this healthier focus, as we talked about ESGs earlier and trying to work in health into those ratings and indexes?
100%. I think that is absolutely something that we're hopeful for. We've talked with some of the B Corp companies or organizations. And again, like the ESG organizations, right now there seems to be an appetite to build in health, but a lack of ways to measure it. So I think one of the things that the public benefit corporations, if they're pointed towards health, if they take health as a value, how are they going to measure that? And how can we help them at Building H in thinking about how to, make sure that their products are yielding health in a way that still yields profit? And that's a very real tension. As Hallie was saying, if your priorities are to maximize consumption, that has consequences. And so if you're trying to moderate consumption or kind of if you're as a company, if you put in caps for consumption of different kinds, how is that going to affect your profits? How is that going to affect your growth? Those kind of things that companies need to measure. So those are real challenges, but I do feel like the B Corps and other publicly minded companies can be a way to prove that it is possible to build products and to build customers and to build businesses that are healthy.
Yeah, I think for any startups listening, these things are just easier to build in from day one.
Totally.
And ensure that like your North Star from day one is health outcomes. And not obviously healthcare startups, yes, it's obvious, but no matter what you're building, if you're building a gaming app, as we've talked about in social media, there are ways to kind of just keep the consumer's health and well-being top of mind from day one. It's much easier than trying to shift a business strategy later down the road.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. And so we, on the side, we develop these design principles. So, there's sustainable design principles and there's accessibility design principles that Microsoft has actually pioneered. So we felt it was important to offer to designers, to builders, to product managers, healthy design principles as well. So we have a handful of them that include something like the more you use it, the healthier you get, which sounds easy, but it is actually really hard.
Create a virtuous, not a vicious cycle.
Totally. And it is possible. Like those behaviors that we talk about, right? Sleeping, exercising, eating well, et cetera. Those people want to do those, right? Those yield not just human benefit, but also human pleasure and human enjoyment. So it makes sense that you would have those as kind of desired outcomes for people who are using their products. You just have to be intentional about it.
Yeah. And I guess if you think about it in the long run, you're going to keep customers around longer if they're healthier. Their whole well-being will impact their spending and their usage. So in the long run, we're all better off if companies keep this in mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at all the people that are fleeing Twitter or fleeing.
I'm one of them.
Yep, me too. And I have also abandoned Facebook because like Facebook is not pleasurable for me by and large. Totally. And I think people, not that some people stay, some people still are there, but there's clearly things that it doesn't satisfy. These products are not satisfying, do not yield kind of human pleasure and human betterment in a way that people can, that is tangible.
So the trolls, they're just not good for my well-being.
Yeah. And if you're a troll and you feed off of those negative energies, have at it. But for those of us who want to live healthier lives, maybe that's not the best product to use.
Yeah, totally. Well, I love this. And I love thinking about health beyond just like our healthcare community, because we are doing all we can to build products to keep people healthy and help them when they're sick. But really everyone, like all these products, as you looked at 75 products that are outside of healthcare, but impact someone's health is really cool. So thank you for sharing that with us. And we will include in the show notes links to Building H.
Absolutely. It's so much fun to talk to you about this with you guys. Thank you so much for your help.
Thanks for the insights, Thomas. Super compelling, super interesting, and my key final takeaway is let's just raise some awareness so maybe we can start aligning profits and business underpinnings with healthier outcomes. So thank you so much for
thank you
for bringing this to all of our attention.
Dare I say, make America healthy again? I think we can all align on that goal.
Hear, hear.
Yep.
Hear, hear.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Healthcare. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and review. And don't forget to subscribe. The Heart of Healthcare is produced by Hallie Tecco and hosted by Michael Esquivel, Steve Krause, and Hallie Tecco. The show is engineered, edited, and mixed by Kyle Moore. Visit our website, heartofhealthcarepodcast.com, for show notes and details.